Welcome, let's settle for the details. It's been more than 13 hours of calm in the Upper East town, Bawku, where gunmen opened fire on a bus carrying students of the Bawku Nursing Training College yesterday. One student remains in hospital after sustaining injuries from that attack. It was the latest in the series of hostilities, which has left at least 5 persons dead in the last few days. Joy News understands there have been no gunshots in the last few hours, but residents remain on the edge as threats of attacks remain high. In the last hour, Municipal Chief Executive Amadou Hamza Azanga, who also heads the Municipal Security Council, gave the following update on News Analysis Show Newsfile.
Bawku is more dangerous than what you think. You cannot have every military man standing by everyone's house. You can't have a policeman to a particular house. And so the deployment that we do in the municipality is supposed to be a distance from the other. And that's what we do.
But have you not failed in your duty to ensure that there are no guns in the homes, where we are told almost every house has guns?
There will never be 2 months past that without searching. The military and the police have done a lot of searching. They've searched almost all houses in Bawku, and it is very difficult to retrieve these guns from the residents of Bawku. We are actually putting our things together. We're gathering our facts. When it happens, there are some instances that we call an emergency meeting. There are other instances where we wait to gather the facts before we can call for a meeting. As I talk to you, the place is not that safe. The commanders are moving about and ensuring there's peace in Bawku. They would have to ensure that people are safe. So we are preparing ahead. From now to Monday or Tuesday, we'll call for a meeting and then and look at the way forward.
Meanwhile, security experts with the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center, Dr. Victor Doke, is calling for a change in the approach by the security in dealing with the conflict.
Now, the political will somehow is lacking. We need to ensure that there's a political will to invest the resources needed, involve the CSOs to come in. There are NGOs on the ground there. Most of the times you don't even hear about these NGOs except when there's a meeting, bilateral consultations that they are invited. But when you go to the ground, you need these NGOs to also be part of you, to ensure your engagement with the community is there. We don't have the sustained engagement going in. Every time we start a process, then we lay back, thinking that when we send the soldiers there to separate the two sides from clashing, then that is it. But you still hear sporadic shootings. That tells you that the guns are still in the system. You need a holistic approach to this.
Also, Member of Parliament's Constitutional and Legal Affairs Committee says there must be punishment for those who are responsible for the 3 persons who died whilst in the custody of the military.
We have a national security strategy document. If you read it, Bawku features in it prominently. So I am surprised, even with all the strategies outlined in the document to dealing with the issues, we still have this problem. Why? Because there are no consequences arising when people commit crimes or offenses or commit acts that ought to be punished.
All right.
There are simply no consequences. These are extrajudicial killings. You can get killed, I can get killed, and nothing happens. When things like this happen, there must be consequences. People must be punished. If you don't punish, we will create an artificial war and commit murder.
Now to matters of the economy, as the International Monetary Fund has released the much-anticipated $600 million second tranche to Ghana. This was announced at a joint press conference between the IMF and the Ministry of Finance last night. The second tranche of the money has delayed because government initially was unable to reach a debt restructuring agreement with its official creditors. But after a successful assessment, IMF Mission Chief for Ghana, Stefan Rode, says the are impressed with Ghana's performance so far.
We have some excellent news to discuss with the completion by our executive board this morning of the first review under Ghana's 3-year, $3 billion program. This allows for an immediate disbursement of about $600 million, bringing the total disbursements since the program was approved in May last year to close to $1.2 billion. In 2022, on the back of unfavorable global conditions, Ghana faced a severe economic and financial crisis with an unsustainable debt burden. In response to these difficult circumstances, the Ghanaian authorities have been implementing a comprehensive reform program aimed at restoring macroeconomic stability and debt sustainability and laying the foundations for stronger and more inclusive growth. Let me mention some of the reforms. To bring public finances back to a sustainable track, the government accelerated fiscal adjustment in 2023 and recently enacted a 2024 budget and revenue reforms that will further advance adjustment in the fiscal position. Budget sustainability is being achieved by mobilizing domestic revenue and by improving the efficiency of public spending. Importantly, the program includes and will continue to include efforts to protect the vulnerable. For example, the 2024 budget has continued to increase benefits under the existing targeted cash transfer program, the Living Empowerment Against Poverty program, the LEAP, and it also boosted allocations toward the school feeding program. To support adjustment and enhance the resilience to shocks, ambitious structural reforms are being implemented in the areas of tax policy, revenue administration, public financial management, as well as to address weaknesses in the energy and the cocoa sectors. To restore public debt sustainability, the government has also made significant progress on its comprehensive debt restructuring. The domestic debt exchange was completed over the summer, and an agreement in principle was recently struck between the government and its official bilateral creditors. Ghana's performance under the program has been compelling, both in terms of meeting the quantitative objectives, for example, on budgetary performance, but also in implementing transformational reforms to make the economy more resilient. Importantly, despite the difficult global economic setting, the authorities' reforms are bearing fruit and signs of stabilization are emerging. Growth has proven more resilient than initially envisaged, and indeed we are revising our growth projection for 2023 from 1.5 to 2.3%. Inflation is declining rapidly. The fiscal and external positions have improved. Bank of Ghana's international reserves have been increasing, and exchange rate volatility has decreased. Notwithstanding the progress made in recent months, the road to full stabilization and recovery will be gradual. Addressing remaining challenges will require determination and steadfast policy reform and reform implementation. But today's news marks an important milestone in the road to recovery and towards building a flourishing economy that will benefit every Ghanaian.
Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta has given governments firm assurance to see a successful implementation of the program. Addressing concerns over government's growing borrowing from the treasury market, he says government will measure its expenditure to enable it slows down on the treasury bills.
It is with great honor that I can announce to you that earlier today, the International Monetary Fund endorsed the first review of our program. This is a resounding affirmation that the program is advancing steadily and our reform trajectory remains steadfast. Consequently, the endorsement has unlocked a $600 million disbursement from the IMF and will pave the way for an additional $300 million disbursement from the World Bank under the Development Policy Operation Financing. The World Bank will meet on Tuesday, January 23rd. In addition, we expect the World Bank to approve $250 million to support the Ghana Financial Stability Fund. These resources in total $1.15 billion will significantly bolster our economic recovery efforts. The government is committed to fully implementing the IMF-supported PC PEG, and we have put in place all the necessary implementation arrangements to make sure the program does not derail so we can fully achieve our intended objectives.
Meanwhile, Governor of the Central Bank, Dr. Ernest Addison, has disputed assertions that the implementation of several current tax policies could lead to another rise in inflation.
The recent trends in inflation that the economy has witnessed in the course of 2023 suggest that we are on course. A year ago, at this time, inflation was around 54%. Through strong and innovative policies, tight monetary conditions, and relative exchange rate stability, inflation has been more than halved by the end of 2023 and is currently reported at 23%. Several factors have supported the disinflation process, and these include the monetary policy stance throughout the year, stable crude oil prices, which led to stable fuel prices, with favorable impact on transportation costs, a relatively stable exchange rate environment, stronger foreign exchange reserve accumulation due to the Gold for Reserve program, and favorable climatic conditions on the food supply chain process.
Economist and Professor of Finance Godfred Bawku says the second tranche of the $600 million from the IMF will not have any positive impact on the ordinary Ghanaian. Speaking on News 4, Professor Bawku accused the NPP government of adopting a lazy approach to raising revenue by imposing more taxes on the ordinary Ghanaian, with the recent one being the 15% imposition of VAT on electricity consumption by residential users.
The price or the cost to ordinary Ghanaians, as you have mentioned, and in many cases, are poorly reflected in the IMF's own assessment of how their program is going. Because if you look at the targets that the IMF is celebrating together with government, it really has no space for this person who is suffering. Typically has no space for the pensioner who picketed or whatever last year and all of that. But that is also consistent with the pathway to restoring macroeconomic stability. The understanding is that when you mess up your economy, as we did, and there's no dispute about that now, because the IMF report has also confirmed that Ghana's vulnerabilities pre-existed even before, in other words, before COVID. COVID only magnified it and demonstrated how weak in terms of economic resilience we were in the run-up to COVID and Russia, Ukraine conflict and the rest of it. So that is largely consistent. So, but if you look at, we will say it's also positive news because the country had gotten to its wit's end. The only way out was to reach out to the IMF. So it will be quite disastrous for Ghana to say that or to receive the news that even under an IMF program, we are not doing well. That will just heighten the uncertainty. But to the extent that the delays in the approval of the first review, it should have been done latest by the 1st November 2023. And we had to wait all this while. And 32 million people or so, all that we're doing was to wait for IMF board approval for $600 million. But of course, we also do know that with that board approval, it also unlocks other funding from the World Bank. I think about $550 million. $250 million of that will go to support the setting up of the Financial Stability Fund. And then the $330 million or so, $300 million or so will go to budgetary support. So that is good news in terms of an important breakthrough for us. But is that sufficient? Is that enough? And the answer obviously is no. Is this manifesting in improved standards of living for the ordinary Ghanaian? Again, the answer is no. Can the ordinary Ghanaian identify with the flamboyant statement of the IMF, the mission chief, about how well the program is doing? The answer is no. The reason is that we are not yet done in terms of the corrective, painful adjustment that is earmarked for Ghana under the program in order to restore macroeconomic stability.
Political risk analyst Dr. Theo Champon says it will be far-fetched to assume that the economy is recovering just on the basis that inflation has gone down. Dr. Champon believes the recent downward trend in inflation in recent months does not depict a resilient economy, adding that the IMF will not fund or will not automatically move Ghana out of its economic rules.
We cannot assume that when you have some relative macroeconomic stability with inflation coming down relatively, your exchange rate being relatively stable, then that necessarily means that you have turned the corner or you even have a resilient economy, because it is yet to translate into the micro level. And you look at the cost of doing business. Businesses are still borrowing now in excess of 30%. You still got the excess tax hikes that we've been talking about, some of which Prof mentions. Now we're talking 15% VAT on electricity, which again is not needed at this point, right? So you see the disconnect. So in one sense, we are celebrating some relative gains on the macroeconomic front, but it is not translating overnight into micro-level improvement in well-being and other sort of indicators. And that will take some time. And that is what leads me, and I've said this on other platforms earlier during this week, that it's going to take at least 2 to 3 years to really see this relative stability on the macro front translate into improving livelihood.
The Trades Union Congress, Africa Center for Energy Policy, and other civil society organizations are urging government to block revenue leakages in the power distribution sector if it wants to generate additional revenue through its new 15% VAT on electricity consumption for residential purposes. Other CSOs, including Imani Ghana, are also raising concerns about the constant imposition of taxes on Ghanaians by the current government. My colleague Kenneth Jesse has more in the following report.
The Finance Minister, Kenneth Furiata, in a letter directed the Electricity Company of Ghana and the Northern Electricity Distribution Company to apply the VAT to residential customers exceeding the maximum consumption level for lifeline units. The move has since been met with stiff opposition from CSOs, interest groups, and the general public. Founder of Imani Africa, Franklin Kujo, further suggested that the actual impact of the new VAT tariff on electricity would be a 21.9% increase rather than the advertised 15%, while the Secretary General of the Trades Union Congress, Dr. Yao Ban, said his outfit would resist the imposition of 15% VAT on electricity tariffs for residential consumers. The Executive Director of the Chamber of Petroleum Consumers, Duncan Amwa, has also voiced his concern on the issue, stressing that the measure was avoidable if efforts were put in place to cut transmission losses and reduce revenue losses pertaining to the ECG. This measure, according to government, is part of its COVID-19 recovery program, aiming to generate additional revenue.
This is Joy News Prime with me, Emma Davis. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. Welcome. Thanks for staying, and a look at the rest of our stories. The Central Regional House of Chiefs has affirmed its support for the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources for lithium mining within the region. This decision dispels rumors that chiefs were opposed to granting access for lithium mining to Barari DV Limited, a subsidiary of Atlantic Lithium. This was after the ministry paid a courtesy call on the Central Regional House of Chiefs to give details of the lithium discovery. Here's Helena Kaig-Ayis' report.
The lithium discovery in Ewoya and other communities in the Mfantsiman municipality of the Central Region has attracted a lot of attention. The Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources paid a courtesy call on the Central Regional House of Chiefs to begin a formal engagement with them and also seek their support. Deputy Minister for Lands and Natural Resources, George Mrekuduka, says contrary to speculations that the traditional leaders in the region were not in support of the agreement, the Regional House of Chiefs has affirmed their support.
But you all witnessed how enthusiastic they were and how happy they were after running them through the nitty-gritties of what is going to happen. So I'm excited, and I believe government will continue the engagement. Yes, it's better we also go to the communities and engage them. If they get to understand, there wouldn't be any hula baloo around. So I think henceforth nobody could come around to say that the chiefs are not in support. The chiefs unanimously agreed and accepted that yes, they are in support of the lithium agreement, and for that matter the production of lithium. So it was an exciting moment.
So currently there's no obstacle in your way, sir?
Not at all. I don't see any obstacle. What I see is deepening the engagement and making sure that we make each aspect of the transition very transparent for Nananum also to be informed. That's all that we need to do.
Honorable, so the other processes that are left, i.e. the ratification and EPA, what timeline should be?
If Nananum, the custodians of the land, are saying, yes, we welcome the idea, we welcome the agreement, we welcome Lithium Atlantic, and we want our people to have jobs. We want the prospects in terms of the 1%, which was well explained to them. I mean, Parliament, yes, they will go through the rudiments and make sure the right things are done. But I believe, as you see in the agreement, we have nothing to hide, and I'm a parliamentarian. I believe it will pass through. It will pass through in terms of ratification. So yes, it must, as enshrined in the Constitution, it must go through Parliament for ratification. So yes, it will, and I believe it will be passed.
President of the Central Regional House of Chiefs, or therefore Amuakwa Buedu the 8th, intimated how blessed the region is, and they are hoping to take advantage of the arrangements.
As the Regional House of Chiefs, we want to take advantage of this opportunity. We are not going to wait for lithium prices to come so low before we take a decision. We must take a decision and take it timely. So we have decided to take advantage, mine lithium for the benefit of our people. As human as we are, we may not have it perfect. It is new, and for every new thing, there will be challenges. We think we can address the challenges, and the benefits as we see now is worth pursuing, and we shall pursue for the benefit of our people.
CSOs have been raising concerns, other people who are experts in these have raised concerns. You did not consult with them, just in a meeting you agreed. Is that okay, sir?
Yes, CSOs may have the reasons why they are saying that. We have been engaged by the ministry, we have been engaged by the Lands Commission. They have explained everything to us. The price of lithium used to be 8,000. Now it was 2,000, and now today it is 1,000. Do we have to wait for it to be 200 or 100 before we take a decision? And if we are taking the decision maybe a year earlier, could we have benefited from the high prices? We must take a decision. It will not be perfect, but it is far better than the contracts or the agreement that we have now.
Central Regional Minister Justina Marigodasan thanked the ministry and the Regional House of Chiefs for a successful deliberation. She hoped that the misinformation by a section of the Ghanaian society about the lithium find would stop. The Deputy Minister for Lands and Natural Resources says the mining of the lithium is safe and arrangements are being made to ensure that the environment is not badly affected. Helen Nakai Ayes report for Joy News.
That's how we wrap up tonight on Joy News Prime with me, Emma Davis. For more news, do log on to myjoyonline.com. Have a good evening.